Welcome to Flourishing Unfiltered, the podcast for high achievers who seek a professional life that feels as good as it looks.
We talk about the unseen journey of struggles on the path to success that people rarely talk about.
I'm Kieran Smith, positive psychology and leadership coach and consultant.
And I'm Dr. Michael Neuhaus, positive psychology and self-leadership speaker and consultant.
Before we begin today, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're recording. We pay our deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
As we share our stories today, we honour the rich tradition of storytelling that has been passed down through generations.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Future of Flourishing, a futures thinking media, training and venture lab dedicated to bridging the gap between scientific knowledge and practical application in the field of human flourishing.
The Future of Flourishing is committed to creating a comprehensive ecosystem of communication and innovation platforms. Find out more about the Future of Flourishing at futureofflourishing.com.
If you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.
Welcome to the show. Today I am thrilled to introduce an exceptional guest, Dr. Darja Kragt. Darja is a distinguished leadership consultant and founder of the Leading Lab. She specialises in helping leaders uncover the hidden beliefs that hold them back from being influential and high-performing. Her passion lies in translating scientific research into actionable solutions, making her insights both profound and practical. Darja believes that everyone is already a leader, which is why she is dedicating her time as a practitioner and researcher to helping leaders of all shapes and sizes to be better, do better, and get better. She has delivered numerous evidence-based leadership training and development programs for clients in both the private and public sectors. She completed her PhD at the University of Western Australia Business School and holds 2 master's degrees in international business and business research from Maastricht University in the Netherlands. Now, Darja is a highly sought-after leadership expert, which is why I'm all the more excited to welcome her onto our show today. Darja, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Darja, you are a full-time researcher and lecturer. You run your own very successful leadership consultancy, The Leading Lab. You're a mum of 3, including your dog, Peggy. Do you have a secret stash of extra hours in the day the rest of us don't know about? I just wonder whether, with such a full plate, what actually inspired you to start your business and enter this field in the first place?
Wow. When you put it like that, I guess it does sound like a lot, doesn't it?
I know it is a lot.
It is a lot. Look, I just maybe start with a small correction. And I'm not a full-time lecturer, okay? So I do part-time things. I guess that's my way of combining them. So
Okay.
It adds up to probably a full-time double overall, but it's not technically full-time. I don't have any extra hours in the day. What I do have is I just do things, and it sounds very simple. Or it sounds sort of all, of course we all do things, but like my way of dealing with stuff is you just sit down, and just do them. My passion for doing the work that I do in leadership development came from I've been a researcher in leadership for a decade before I became a real practitioner. So I was doing things, bits here and bits there. But really, after having spent a decade in academia, I'm very passionate about leadership research. But there came up a moment where I said, well, what am I doing to actually improve leadership out there in the real world? Like I'm doing research, I'm publishing these insights. It's all very important. But how am I actually translating these insights? How am I helping people to become better leaders with those insights? And that's really kicked off my, practitioner journey and the consultancy and the coaching and the designing and facilitating all of that is through this, idea. I can't sit in the ivory tower anymore. I have to get out and I have to share and I have to translate and I have to give that knowledge, essentially back to people, and inspire them to really use evidence-based practice. So that's how I started, and that's how I'm still going.
That's amazing. I love that. Very inspiring, and I love that you've come out of that ivory tower and sharing all that knowledge with us. Karen, were you about to say something?
Yeah, no, I'm very much the same, Michael. I think I was just wanting to acknowledge the fact that it's kind of a noble thing to do, to try and find a different avenue or a different path to be able to share more of your wisdom with people, because and I think for myself and Michael, very much the same. You have this wisdom and knowledge, and you want more people. You want more people to be impacted in a positive way, and it sounds as though that's a really strong part of the why in the work that you've done with the Leading Lab. So one of the things that our listeners are really curious to know about is, we hear the success, we see the success, we see the on the outside we can see what it looks like, and you're juggling all of these things all at once, and you mentioned there's no time left in your day. What our listeners are really tuning in to learn about is what's happening behind the scenes. What are the challenges that we're experiencing, either as individuals or leaders? Either times that we've felt isolated, or we've felt challenged in the work that we're doing. Can you maybe talk us through any occurrences that you've experienced, in the process of being a mum, but also, creating the Leading Lab as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and so straight away, just that, people, don't see like just the shiny picture. Like, I was up last night till 10:30 p.m. Working on a tender. I went to bed at 10:30. I couldn't fall asleep till about midnight, because obviously, your brain is kind of still in that working mode. It takes you sitting in front of the screen. And I fell asleep at probably about midnight. I don't even know. And I woke up at 5:30 this morning because my kids were up, right? So it's not shiny behind the scenes. That's just today, right? I actually founded my company. I've started my company. I've started my practice, right? Which is essentially my company, is my practice. Is, when I was on maternity leave with my second child. True story. I got bored. I know how it sounds. But Mike, you'll know this, but like, there's a moment when you have the baby stage, right? Like, they're still little and they're laying in your arms, and you're kind of like, you've been there before, you've done that before, you know what sort of you're doing. They don't really, apart from holding them all the time, they don't really need that much more. So it was literally what I did. I was holding a baby in one arm and I was typing on my computer with the other.
That is so funny, Darja. Can I just intersect? Because you know what I did in that moment? I started my PhD.
See? Yeah.
After I had my second child, I got bored and did a PhD.
And it was great time, because really, like, there were no expectations, because I was a maternity leave, so I was like, I'm just doing this as a side hustle. There was no expectations. There was just passion. There was ideas. There was like excitement about getting it done. It was a great time. It was a lot of free time of sitting on the couch and thinking. And because I was limited in my doing, right? I can only do that much with one hand typing. I don't know how other people do it, but and it was a great time. I really look back at that time as, probably one of the kind of greatest like thinking times I've ever had, because I don't have any time for thinking anymore. And I think that's a real struggle. I think that's where that you should be spending more time, on big things like strategy, like developing your models, research. Like to me, it's developing a research framework first and then translating it into practice. You should spend more time in deep thinking. You should spend more time planning, and you just get stuck in this, putting out these fires. Like, every day is about putting out fires rather than, spending that time to really deep think. And that's a real struggle.
Wow, that is so interesting, I guess. And I can also relate to that. I feel like that's one of the reasons I left academia, because I felt like I didn't actually have any time anymore to do the thing that we should be able to do as academics, and that's thinking, in particular creative thinking. But I want to go back to what you said earlier on in the conversation, and that, you sit down and you just get stuff done. I mean, I get that to an extent, but I wonder about our listeners, has that never been a struggle to you, like for you, procrastinating or just being a little bit slow or ineffective or anything like that? Are there any other struggles you have other than maybe no time left to think?
Look, definitely. I think, So my way of procrastination, okay, so because I have so many things on at the same time, the way that I procrastinate, I just work on something else that I need to work on. Okay, so which is crazy, right?
Excellent.
So I'm actually procrastinating. I do procrastinate a lot, but the way that I end up procrastinating is I kind of switch the focus on, and I guess that's, I know we're talking about the downsides, but the advantage of having very different things that you're doing, like the academia plus versus practice versus being a parent, is that you have such a variety that you have a choice of, I don't feel like this right now, so I could do this instead. And I know it's crazy, and I'm a workaholic, okay? Full disclosure, I've always been a workaholic. Like I've always been. I can't unfortunately work as much as I used to because I'm getting older and I can feel that. But like, true story again, when I was doing my PhD, I would be sitting at the business school, which was just down that way in campus. That's where I'm pointing. I would be there 2 o'clock in the morning doing data analysis. Wow. And I loved it because it was a quiet time. There was no one else. I could focus, I could sit, and I could do the stuff that I need to do, right? So I've always been a workaholic. So I don't know where I get it from. I'm just am, right? But speaking of struggles, the thing that I really wanted to share with you today was the questions that you've asked me. Is that I've started my business, as I've told you, about sort of 3 years ago-ish now, and it. For the first, how you get that first stage is like the honeymoon stage where, you're starting to get your first clients and you're starting to get your first, and everything seems to be going really great, and you get attention because people are like, oh, who is this? Who is this person? What are they doing? Yeah. And then, so last year, I ran sort of, I was about maybe a year and a half into kind of the process. And so my lowest point, right? Because you asked me about what was the lowest point, what was the biggest struggle so far. I'm sure there will be plenty more to come. It just was this combination of, I guess, the kind of those contextual factors, right? So I've lost a couple of proposals in a row. So it was like literally like on day one, I got a no. On day two, I got a no. I got like three or four in a row. And they were pretty big, like substantial pieces of work. It wasn't just, like something somewhere. And then at the same time, and that's sort of to me, and like really started a really kind of that cycle of self-doubt and that spiral of like, every next hit is just hitting you right in the face and making you feel worse, So I was like, what am I doing? Why am I even doing this? What is going on? Why can't I, win this proposals, and the thing was like that, and I think that was like one of the hardest things. The clients were giving me like exceptional feedback. They were like, you were amazing, your proposal was great, but we're still not gonna go with you. We're still not gonna give you the job. And you kind of go, well, like no one even can give you the feedback that you actually need to then like, you're saying to me I'm exceptionally great, but you're still not giving me the jobs. Like, what's going on? And of course now I'm smarter and I'm like politics and blah, blah, blah. But at the time, that was how I saw it, right? And then on top of that, I had a mentor at the time, which I was really close to. And we had like a really, like maybe 12 months, like mentoring kind of relationship. And there was a person whom I really trusted and I really respected and was helping me a lot, and sort of, and of course naturally, like I'm feeling really down, I'm feeling really really quite shitty, if I can say. Of course. And I reach out and I have a conversation, and I could still feel it, right? Like I can feel it right now, like in the chest. And the person basically tells me that, and this is someone who's been mentoring me for 12 months, knowing what I do, right? Yeah. And he goes, you know what, in the end of the day, I think consultants are people who are not good enough to do the thing themselves, because all they do is tell other people what to do, but they don't actually do things.
Oh my God.
And just destroyed me, guys. Destroyed me on the spot.
Just imagine.
Because if I go, if someone that I trust and someone that's been my mentor for 12 months turns around and tells me that he thinks that the work that I do is worth nothing, and I'm seeing this feedback from the clients, it's all happening, then, so I was destroyed. I was completely
gobsmacked,
shattered for probably, I don't know, a couple of months at least. Like that was a really dark time in, my journey as a consultant. And
I can imagine. And I have to say,
absolutely.
even I am a bit gobsmacked right now. I'm just wondering, how many people think like that? Why do people think like that? Like, what kind of experiences have they had with consultants to be thinking like that? I don't know. That's a question I can't answer myself. I can only pose it. I don't know if I even want it to be a rhetorical question. But so what did you end up doing in that situation? Did you fire him as your mentor?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we haven't really spoken since then. So this would be about not just under a year now. About we did try to kind of speak, but yeah, as you can imagine, like it was really like it the relationship is just destroyed, and you can't move past that. There's just some things you can't move past. Otherwise, I think I managed to find other people who were actually a bit more supportive. And I think that's a really important thing, and I think this is why I love what you're doing here, is that when you can go and talk to someone or listen to someone and say, hey, it's not actually just me. It's like people have these experiences. Everyone have an experience where they've just been low and doubting and, not sure if they need to continue and all of that sort of stuff. And it validates you, right? Yeah. More than anything else. I find people who just, said, look, like these things sort of happen and, we know how you feel. We've done that before, but as trivial as it sounds, you just have to keep going. You just have to. You can't. You just have to do more things, and things will change, and it's always ups and downs. And that's what I did, because that's what I can do. Because that's what I told you in the start. I do things, and if I focus on doing, I can just keep going, and I can keep doing things, and inevitably, like things get better, and like I said, I'm sure there will be plenty more lows and ups and downs, but that was a pretty tough spot to be in.
And thank you for sharing all that. I wonder, do you think you took it in a different way, or maybe more to heart than you ever would in research when you apply for a grant and you don't get it? And
look, I think rejection is always really hard. Like I don't know any people who will go like, oh, I love getting a no. Here's a project that I wish I didn't do. I think it's funny you asked that. I think I've been thinking a lot about since then about the fact that it probably correlates with my own inability to say no, as funny as it sounds. So kind of my, I really struggled with rejection, and I always have, and it's gotten better, but I don't think it's a long way to go, and I don't think it's ever will get to the point where I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever. But, my own kind of way that I also don't like saying no, and I wonder if there is a relationship there that is, your comfort with rejecting other people is also then correlated with your comfort of other people rejecting you, if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense, and I think that's a very interesting thought to play with. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And I love already, the grit that you're showing. So what I've been hearing so far in terms of, how you've been able to, let's say, navigate that challenge of being rejected a couple of times, and then also on top of that, having that interaction with your mentor. So what I'm hearing is that you're saying, you surrounded yourself with, let's say, like-minded people. I think that's important, people who understand the business, so who validate you also, as a consultant, sort of maybe, piece that back together for you, but who also remind you that it's so common and normal to be rejected. It probably just was a weird and sad coincidence that you were rejected a couple of times in a row. And who were sort of cheering you up. And then also you saying, you just have to keep going. So there's that grit, and sit down and just do what you can do best, and that's getting things done. Was there anything else you would add to that helped you cope?
Look, I think my strategy always has been reflection and self-awareness. I mean, in a way of really trying to kind of understand my own experiences and why I might be feeling a certain way. Probably not right then and there in the moment, but kind of as soon as possible, and I think to me that really helped. To example, now I know that out of that, I've developed almost like a coping strategy where if I notice the signs of feeling like, I'm not good enough, or, am I doing the right thing? Should I even be doing this? Like all of those sorts of initial thoughts, I probably can pick them up these days a lot kind of sooner and faster before it gets into that emotional spiral, downward spiral, right? And also have a bit more, I guess, relaxed approach of, well, not relaxed, but kind of reframing, right? Like that's another strategy, is to say, okay, well, we've been here before, know why you feel that way. It's normal to feel that way. Just let's not sink into that hole. Let's just acknowledge it, that, and move on to something else. Yeah. I mean, does it work every time? Absolutely not. But you got to keep trying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's so good, though, to reflect like that afterwards, right? So that next time you do maybe have a couple of more things to choose from because you've already reflected on that, more consciously after a knockback the first time.
Yeah, and this almost leads in perfectly into the next question that I really want to ask, Darja. It's just around, reflecting on, your experiences here. We've sort of heard that, we've copped some nasty feedback from a mentor, the being knocked back for tenders and things like that. These things all take a bit of a toll on us. And then in amongst that, bringing up a family, curious to know what are maybe a couple of lessons, maybe even just like 2 or 3 lessons that you've learned from this experience, and whether that, you mentioned reframing. I don't know if that's one of the lessons, a key lesson that you had mentioned there that you think you've learned, but what are some key lessons that you think you've learned from all of this?
Great question. Yeah, I think to me it's definitely the lesson is more kind of understanding that, any trajectory, like particularly the business trajectory, will always be ups and downs. Like it's just almost inevitable, that there's no way that it's a linear positive curve, or not curve, but linear positive line upwards, right? And I think this is again where, I hate LinkedIn, especially these days.
Wow, that's so interesting because LinkedIn seems to love you.
Well,
maybe I should just speak on behalf of myself.
It's just, you go on there and you go like, I've done this and I won this award and I haven't used this and I haven't used that. And it's just become like a bragging platform.
Yeah, minefield.
Yeah. And I think, and that's another thing, like I've actually picked out that I feel bad after scrolling on LinkedIn. Like I feel emotional toll of being on there. And I'm like now limiting that exposure, right? I'm taking kind of active steps to limiting that exposure. I think with, going back to your, Karen, to your question, that trying to identify, I guess, coping strategies that work for me is something that I'm much more mindful of and actively kind of pursuing, rather than just relying on, whatever happens. It's like, no, okay, like how are we gonna, how am I gonna deal with this if that happens? I've always been a pessimist at heart, which doesn't help. Yeah, yeah.
Didn't know that.
But it doesn't help, but sometimes it does, because if you're expecting the worst to happen, you're kind of prepared for it a bit more when it comes. And then if the good thing happens, then you're surprised and amazed, right? I didn't expect this to happen. I think it's a lot about social connections, being able to talk to other people. And I think it's, to me, it's like, again, as I don't even know what the word is, but as weird as it sounds, it's just keep going, like, what's the next thing? Okay, yep, this didn't work out. What is the next thing? Because one of them, statistically, something is going to work out, right? like it's, statistically, probabilities. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that point, and I think this is actually a really good insight for our listeners too, Darja. Just the ability to reframe and reflect, but also the point that you mentioned earlier, that the pathway for your business isn't necessarily going to be linear. I think that's a really important point for our listeners to just maybe gravitate towards. That there are peaks and troughs, the trials and tribulations. Micah and I have spoken about that before, and our other guests also. So it's a really good insight to be able to share and I think highlight with our listeners.
Absolutely. And if I can add to that, I also love that you mentioned before that you have a look at what coping mechanisms actually work for you. That it's something, some things will work better for one person than for another, and just to try out different things and then see what works and what doesn't work, I think is always a really good idea too.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a really valuable lesson in that I think that, this is one of those things when, people often lead towards a self-help book or something like that, where they're looking for answers, but I think this point around trialing, experimenting, and finding what works for you as an individual is so important. So I think, another great insight to add to the mix here.
So you've mentioned a few times, that roller coaster that, working for yourself is. I don't anticipate this to get any better either. I mean, I love, working for myself, and I most of the time I love the thrill, but sometimes it just breaks me. But then, looking into the future, is there anything in particular, a piece of advice that you would give yourself, that you would give others, that might make it easier to, if you kept that in your back pocket to deal with challenges that might be ahead?
Hindsight is always a fantastic thing.
Okay, how do we put this into a piece of advice?
Good question. Look, I think as much as a kind of a fun thought experiment it is to think about what do I wish I knew, and would have helped me, as much as that's, interesting to think about, really. I'm not sure to what extent that's actually helpful for, kind of, I mean, I don't know, you might have some evidence on that, Micah, but happy to be proven wrong. I think it's more, the future, right? Like you said, so where I think where I am now, and where do I want to go? I think, and this is kind of on a more positive side, I think what I need to remember, and maybe it will resonate with other people, is continuously being open-minded to what other things might pop up, and instead of the doors that close, what other doors might be opening. And to me, it's if I dwell for too long, or if I spend too much time kind of dwelling on things that didn't work out, maybe I'll miss other things that might be kind of opportunities, right? Might be, in hindsight, be like, oh, this is why it didn't work out, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do this. Obviously, that's not how it works, or at least I don't believe in that. But being open and being persistent through those difficult times, and trusting, I guess, yourself in the first place, that you're just gonna make it work, and you're gonna somehow you're gonna have the capacity and capability to do things that you want to do, and other things which you don't maybe even know right now about. Like if I look at my portfolio of work right now, a year ago, I would have never imagined doing things that I'm doing right now, right? So that's kind of where I'm. But there's also a downside to that, is where is the limit to that? How do you know when you're going too far, or how do you know when to say no, which is something that we spoke about briefly as well. How do you know where you're bound? That's a hard one to navigate as well. I think that's a really hard one. Is yes, there are new things, but which one of these new things do I want to, and how do I decide? And I don't think that's the stage I'm at now. Probably that's if we were recording this, like I say, in 12 months' time, maybe I probably would say, a year ago I was right now in the space where I'm like, there's many different avenues here, and I can't pursue all of them because I already do way too much. How do I actually decide on where to focus more my energy and my time, and to pursue, and which ones of these do I want to do? Which ones of these potentially I think will be most successful or most rewarding, or anything like that. So I think that's another kind of, it's like you don't have enough or don't have anything happening. That's hard, but you have too much happening. That's hard as well, because you have to make these decisions which are about saying no. And again, I'm not comfortable saying no to other people.
Yeah. But I also loved that you mentioned earlier, about self-trust. And I guess the only way to find this out, if you haven't gone this journey before, is to try it out. Try it out, take on the things you think you can take on, you're keen to take on, keen to try out. If it's not for you, well, there's a lesson learned. And as you also said, don't dwell. Take a lesson, but don't dwell, because, taking the lesson is constructive. Dwelling is so, not constructive. And then, building that self-trust through that. I love that. And you also mentioned something about, trust that you can deal with the challenges that are ahead. And there is evidence for that. It's part of something called affective forecasting. We do tend to underestimate our ability to deal with challenges in the future. It's called immune neglect. So I love that you mentioned that, because we always think, oh my goodness, if this happens, if I get a rejection for this proposal or whatever it might be, it's going to break me or whatever. No, you will get back up. Trust that you can do it. And then obviously what you mentioned as well, that whole idea of preparing for the what ifs. I guess, for some people it can make them anxious, people who don't tend to be naturally anxious. You said you were naturally pessimistic. I don't know how that's linked, but it can make people anxious if they're not naturally anxious already. But for those who do tend to be anxious, playing through the what-if scenarios, even the negative ones, can actually help them and prepare them in a constructive way as well. I think that's often misunderstood in the general population as well. So, loving all yours. Yeah, see?
I knew you would provide a couple of research framings for that. Fantastic. Well done.
You're doing well, Darja. Excellent.
The insights are gone both ways here, which is very helpful. And I love this notion too that, like some doors need to close and we just need to let them close as well. And that can be really difficult for a lot of people. But I think it's an important lesson, particularly in the work that we're doing. Look, Darja, this has been an incredibly fascinating conversation, and it's always great to hear the insights of business leaders that are still navigating and working out where to next. even when on the surface we see things look to be going really well. Look, it is super fascinating for our listeners to tune in and hear some of these insights, and I'm sure that they're going to gather a whole range of different things that they can take away from today's conversation. But if people want to learn a little bit more about the work that you're doing, where can they find out a little bit more about what you've got coming up or the work that you're currently doing? Where would the best place for them to go to be?
Yes, so this is the part where it's going to get awkward because you can find me on LinkedIn.
Which I'm sure you will happily welcome a conversation. Is that right?
Just don't show off too much.
I think that's probably the best place, LinkedIn. I do have a website, theleadinglab.com.au. Probably needs a bit of an update. That's a good problem to have where you don't have time to update your website, right?
Yeah.
But, mainly on LinkedIn and sort of around the place as well. So very welcome, obviously. Love the conversations on LinkedIn. I've had many fantastic connections, including the very own Micah here. This is where we found each other. So it is a good place. Okay, it has some difficulties, limitations, but it is a good place to connect with people and have conversations.
Amazing. And obviously we're going to link to your LinkedIn as well as your website, theleadinglab.com.au, in the show notes, so people can definitely find you there. And I just want to add to that, you do share amazing content on LinkedIn, and that's why I said earlier LinkedIn loves you, because the quality of content you share there is amazing. So I'm sure everybody's going to enjoy that. Darja, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute honor to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Wow, how was that for you, Karen? What did you think?
Oh, I love that conversation. There were so many aspects of it that resonated so deeply with me. I think the time aspect, I often get asked, people will say, oh, how are you, you're working full time and then you're doing this and you're trying to keep up with your exercise and things like that. Like, how do you fit it all in? And my response is always just. It's like my default response to say that. And I think the Darja probably very similar. And I think, that notion of want to keep, it's almost like enjoy. She finds passion in her work and she just wants to fill her day with as much of it as possible. And I kind of love that. I know that she sort of referred to herself as a workaholic a lot, but I do love the idea of filling our time with things that bring us joy, and it's safe to say that for her, part of that is work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it always inspires me when I meet people who are so passionate about their work and who seem to really, be realizing their potential, working in their purpose, with their businesses and stuff like that. I find it so inspiring. Obviously, side note maybe, that we know from research it's still so important to take the breaks and, do something disengaging from your work for a bit and stuff like that, because otherwise it will still have that cumulative burden on the body and the mind. But I know I found it so funny when she shared about her procrastinating with other work. I don't know about you, but I just thought immediately, that's what I do. I don't know if you realize, but I got a lot done on our podcast. That's my favorite thing to procrastinate with at the moment.
Yeah, most definitely. I have been there before as well, and it's just like you might have a bunch of like pressing, demanding tasks, but then there's something that's really exciting and I want to spend a bit more time on that. So then it's like, well, how can I get the other tasks done more efficiently so I can spend more time doing the one that I want to be doing? I've definitely been there before.
Exactly.
Well, I did want to tap into something here, and that I've recently come back off of a hike, because for me, one of the things that I love doing to disconnect from the busyness of my day is to get out and be in nature and connect back to the land. That's something that I love doing. I'm sure our listeners might be interested. Like, what are some things that you love doing that give you that opportunity to disconnect from the busyness of everything that you've got going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm probably very similar to you. I love just being out. I love hiking. I love being in nature. I love exploring cities too. I mean, if I need a little bit more wellness and calm and zen, I'll go into nature. But I could walk through new towns and stuff like that for hours. And the other big thing for me is connecting with my friends. It's a massive one. That's when I, lose track of time, and I come out of my, meta perspective or meta thinking. I'm just in the moment. I just let go, and I love that. So yeah, for me, it's a couple of different modes.
Absolutely, they're really good insights, and I think good for our listeners to hear that whilst we might appear very busy people as well, we do enjoy having that disconnect time.
Yeah,
and we know, and we've heard a lot about that importance of the social connection as well. And it doesn't surprise me at all that that's something that's resonates with you, something you deeply enjoy.
Okay.
I want to highlight one other thing that I found really interesting in the conversation and found really inspiring too. Was Darja spoke a lot about how she's written these multiple tender applications and sort of been knocked back, but she was getting good feedback, and I just love that persistence there to keep going back and having another go. And I think that that's kind of the reality of, the infancy of a business as you're trying to gather and collect more work, that you are going to get knocked back, and you're not always going to get a great reason as to why. But I just found that like a really interesting point that she mentioned as well, and very notable and admirable.
Yeah, absolutely. I adore that too. And I guess, again, it just shows how much she's actually in her own lane, as in playing to her own strengths, living her purpose, because it screams grit, right? The whole concept, Angela Duckworth's grit, the long-term perseverance together with effort and your passions or talents or interests, however you want to word that. Obviously she is being very gritty because she's already in her lane. So I absolutely adore that. And I guess, you just said it before, you might not always get a good reason as to why you are having setbacks or anything like that. And sometimes there isn't a reason, and sometimes life just isn't fair. Mm-hmm. How privileged are we in so many ways, and others aren't at all. And grit will be even more important when there is no apparent reason whatsoever that you're doing it tougher than maybe another person, right?
Oh, most definitely. And I was it's quite funny, I was thinking of Angela Duckworth as well as Darja was explaining that. I was also thinking of Susan David, who speaks a lot about our emotions and how we, when we're in tune with them, and that understanding of the emotions, because she kept on saying that, one of the best coping strategies was to reflect in those moments and learn from them. But I think she was almost inadvertently saying that she likes to reflect on how she's feeling and then learn as well, which I love. I think, it's that notion that there's no such thing as good or bad emotions, there's just good or bad reactions to emotions.
Yeah.
And that was just so lovely, the way I think that she spoke about the reframing process that she went through that reflective process too.
That is so true. And it's true that, that whole idea of reflecting on our emotions. Well, don't we just, know what we feel? Don't we just feel what we feel? But how complex are those, emotions when they're not just those basic emotions? But, those situations are deeply complex. You're being knocked back. You're probably frustrated. You're probably exhausted. You're probably angry. You might be hurt in your pride. Why is someone else getting it when they just told you, you are so amazing? So these things are so complex. But it's like, once we know what it really is, can we actually tend to the needs we have that are underlying those emotions? Do we just need to, I don't know, get a little bit of self-care and, tend to feeling sore? Fine, let's do that. Is it that there's a lesson to be learned here and we need to upskill in something? Also cool. Let's understand that and then get on with that, But I 100% agree with you, and also appreciated that when she shared it. And I also have to say, I'm actually surprised that she has those knockbacks too. I know why we're having this podcast. I know why we're having these chats, but I don't know why I'm surprised, but I am, because that's exactly what you see all the time, is they're so successful, and she is so successful, and yet on top of her success, of course she has some knockbacks. Would that have ever crossed my mind? Not really. Or maybe I would have said, of course, probably she also gets some knockbacks, but in my mind I probably would have assumed that barely scratches the surface of her emotions because she's so successful. No, it is a real setback for her as well. And the other thing, sorry, and I'm coming from one thing to the next, is that whole struggle with LinkedIn, which is obviously representative for any social media platform. But again, to me, she's one of those people on LinkedIn who's absolutely killing it. People are loving her posts. She shares great content all the time. She just rocks up. Whereas I've been pretty much inactive now for probably over a year or about a year or something like that, because I just can't deal, sometimes, and I just would rather not be there and look at it. It just makes me angry for so many different reasons. How do you find that?
Yeah, I think each platform has its pros and cons, I think, and I find that it's like it's peaks and troughs, my desire to want to engage with them, and for the reasons why they vary as well. I had a massive social media blackout a while ago, and it was so refreshing. And then, more recently joined and trying to be quite active in the social media space as well has been a bit of an interesting challenge. I think for the same reasons that Darja was talking about, that it can be okay at times, but then at other times it's like, how genuine are we being in this space as well? And it definitely got me thinking about the content that I'm, placing on there and the reason why I'm putting things on there. I mean, at the moment, I kind of like poking the bear and putting things out there that, maybe ignite a bit of a fire in people's bellies, conversation starters. I think that's the content I'm enjoying. There's not a lot of like, how amazing is my work at the moment. It's just like, ooh, found this really interesting piece. I think that we should all be talking about it. How can I write something that gets other people wanting to talk about it? But I can understand that frustration with not just LinkedIn, but other platforms too.
Yeah, I agree. I think, it's more or less all the same. But, that notion of, people will, never remember what you said or something like that, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I think the same counts for posts on any social media platform.
Yeah.
And people do see through it, your intentions.
Yeah, most definitely.
You sharing your vulnerabilities just to, show off that, I don't know, you only got 3 degrees done this year, or I don't know, whatever that might be.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And I think I go between a mix of wanting to be really informative because I just want more people to be exposed to the good work in the world of positive psychology, but then I go through phases of, I think more people should be talking about this. This is really important stuff. So how can I get people excited about it? How can I be a conversation starter in that space? So I enjoy a bit of both.
Yeah, trial and error. And wasn't that another thing Darja mentioned, the whole idea of trialing it out and see what works for you, see what sticks, and then, going from there. Absolutely.
I love that notion as well, and I think that's a good lesson for us as well. And finally, one of the maybe the key insight that I really took away from that, and the thing that I liked the most, was this notion that the progress in a business isn't linear, that there are ups and downs, and I think that's a really great insight that Darja shared with us.
Absolutely.
And something that I'm definitely going to take away from here, just as a reminder. I think, when you're going through, when you're in one of those troughs, just to go, no, it's okay to be here. This will pass. Yeah, but also to be expecting more setbacks in the future without wanting to sound too pessimistic. But they're going to happen. And if you're prepared for that, at least mentally, emotionally, without obviously knowing what the setback might be, I do agree that helps. Yeah, most definitely. Well, look, some really great insights from today's conversation. Plenty of takeaways on our end, yes. I think. I took a bunch of notes, as I always like to do, and I'm sure our listeners will be doing the same as well. So hopefully everyone enjoyed today's conversation, and stay tuned for our next one.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We hope our conversation helped normalize the struggles so many of us face on the path to success. While on the outside things often look like sunshine and rainbows, this is rarely the experience for anyone behind the facade.
But instead of letting that demotivate you, we hope it does the exact opposite, to let it fuel you to keep pursuing your purpose and realise your potential. Just without the added burden of feeling inadequate, and a little more patience, some tips, and self-compassion instead. For further info, head to our website, flourishingunfiltered.com, and get in touch with us via our socials, @flourishingunfiltered.
Now, if you or someone you know is struggling with feelings of loneliness, low mental health, or suicidal thoughts, please know that there are people who care and treatments that can help. We've compiled some helplines for you in the show notes.
It's a wrap for Flourishing Unfiltered today. Please give us a follow and leave us a comment and a review. We hope you tune in next time.